The 18th century saw a development called the Enlightenment. It was the century of the French Revolution, the American War of Independence, and the Industrial Revolution. Now, the Enlightenment, what had really happened was that after the terrible religious wars of the 17th century, and it has been said that religious wars tend to be more brutal than any other. It makes sense, because why do people go to war? They either do it for booty or for ideology. If they do it for booty, that means they want the good stuff, and so they won't just destroy it, otherwise there's no point going to war. But people will fight to the death for what they believe, and if you have a clash of ideologies, then you will have terrible wars. And by the 18th century, people were war-weary. They were tired of war, and they became tired of religion. So the 18th century saw a development called the Enlightenment. Men turned their backs on all authority, God, king, and even parents. They refused to believe in original sin, and taught that all men are born good, and need no one to tell them what to do. This was the beginning of the general mindset that we call liberalism. Now, because of the penal laws, any priest would be hanged on sight just for being a priest. It was illegal for Catholic boys to be educated in Ireland. The Irish traditional music was being destroyed as much as possible. An uilleann piper would be hanged with his pipes round his neck. And during nearly 200 years, Holy Mass was offered in secret in Ireland at the Mass Rocks, while learning was maintained in the hedge schools. Usually the parish priest would be hiding behind a hedge and teaching the children the rudiments of education, the catechism, of course, but also English, because people had to know English, and mathematics and history, and anything he could manage. Those were the hedge schools. In the 18th century was the American War of Independence. England lost control of her American colonies, and the United States of America came into being. And in the 18th century, the state of Prussia in northern Germany became very strong. King Frederick the Great of Prussia cared nothing for right and wrong, and everything for power. In the 18th century occurred the partition of Poland. The once independent country was divided up between Prussia, Austria, and Russia, and for a great length of time there was no territory called Poland, but the Polish people kept their identity, they kept their Catholic religion, they kept their language, and they bided their time. The French Revolution occurred in the 18th century, an easy date to remember, 1789. The King of France and his Queen were beheaded, and large numbers of priests, nuns, and ordinary people were put to death. There was no law, and nobody was safe. Yet all this was done in the name of liberty, equality, fraternity. A serious attempt was made to wipe out the Catholic Church. But in the end, as has happened in other revolutions, the leaders of the revolution were putting each other to death, and the French, who had been persuaded to turn against their king, now were grateful to accept a man of no royal birth at all, not even French, as the Emperor Napoleon. He promised the French people a new period of law and order, and that he would make France great again. From the middle of the 18th century occurred the Industrial Revolution, the discovery of coal. The invention of the steam engine led to the development of much more rapid transport and the building of large factories. It is very sad that this happened just when religion had reached its lowest ebb in Europe, because the poor old factory workers were treated like farm animals. People left their cottages and their cottage industries, began to live in large cities, working in factories and living in slums. At the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century were the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon led his armies on wars of conquest such as had not been seen since the barbarian invasions. No question of asking permission for the Pope now. There had been wars all through the Middle Ages, but we have discussed that. So the Napoleonic Wars ravaged most of Europe.